Okay. Well, it is great to see everybody's faces. Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for investing this time. Again, now that the guys have come in, let me just say a couple things that I've already said. But so, ladies, you'll probably hear this a couple of times. But this is not just primarily only about relationships in a marriage setting. This is going to be important for any relationship that you might have, although there will be some aspects of it that are going to be based on a marriage relationship. And that means if there's a one in your future and you're a single or whatever, then that would apply. But still, one of the things we talked about a couple of weeks ago in here when we were talking about the measure of a woman, guys, we were on a different topic out there, but the ladies were talking about how to love your husband well. And one of the things that we said about that was it was still an important topic to talk about, even if you're not married or even if you're divorced or just single or widowed, because there are people that need to be taught these things. And so we are good stewards of the things that we learn about, yes? Of course, we talked about stewardship last week here at Renew. Hopefully you heard that. And we need to be good stewards, which is a good manager of all of our resources. That's our time, our talents, and our treasures. The things that we learn, hopefully we are good stewards of. If you learn something about Christ, hopefully we're a good steward of it, which means we don't take it and just go, okay, I'm going to use this just for myself, but instead we want to pass it along. We want to teach other people. And so the things that we learn about are things that we can be good stewards of, that we can pass this along. We can train up other people in the way they should go. We can train children. We can train various individuals on the things that we learn about, and hopefully that's always the case. One of the greatest blessings in the world would be if you leave here on a Sunday and you've heard something that really begins to change the way you think or it's impacted you in some way, that you would go tell someone about it. That would hopefully be a natural way that you would share things with people. And I know many of you do that already, and so that's good. And so as we talk through these things, it is a stewardship issue, whether you think it applies directly to you. It will absolutely, at the very least, indirectly apply to you, and we want you to apply these things. And so we're going to begin then tonight with a story that I want to tell you about, and Jennifer will be up here in a few minutes, and we're going to do some of these things together. But a story begins this way. In 1993, there was this beautiful young couple that decided to get married. Well, at least I should say the woman was beautiful. The guy was a little weird looking, and that's okay. But this beautiful young couple decided to get married in a rose garden. It was a beautiful day. It was 72 degrees. It was the summer of 1993, if you do your math well, and that was a summer of lots of rain and floods. And this one day, though, on June 5th, the day that they decided to get married, it was the one day that was sunny in 2 weeks, and the sun came out. It was a beautiful day. For the sake of the story, we'll call the woman by the name of Jennifer, and we'll call for the sake of the story, we'll call the guy in the story, the one that was a little weird looking, we'll call him Spencer. But just, the names are just, purely made up, so you don't think that this is anyone's personal story. We don't want to overwhelm anybody. The first year of their marriage, first year and a half of their marriage, was not good. It was actually very bad. It was complete survival. This young couple talked about divorce in their first year of marriage. But after Spencer became a Christian, which took a couple of years, the marriage started to improve, and that was good. It was good, and the marriage became good. It became okay. There was some challenges for sure, and there was disconnect in lots of areas. Spencer was pretty good at not complaining about Jennifer to all of his friends, although in talking to his friends, found out that most of his friends had same kind of relationship issues, difficulty communicating, difficulty understanding one another. And so Spencer and Jennifer tried to build closeness, and the way that Spencer did it was he bought Jennifer expensive gifts, because in his mind, that was the way to show her goodness and love, and especially around Christmas time. In fact, there's a story that Spencer told me one time that that he bought his wife Jennifer a ruby ring set in diamonds, and the way she responded to that was, "That's nice." And it made Spencer very mad. He is a punk, though, so it's okay. And so, Spencer tried other things because jewelry didn't work, tried to give her back rubs and stuff. That didn't lead to the places that he expected it to. And so, like good communication. I don't know why are you laughing about that. Jennifer tried as well, and Jennifer tried at times to invite Spencer to come sit on the couch and talk about the day. And that didn't always go great. And sometimes even asked Spencer to come do the dishes with her because that was a way they could just spend time together, and that didn't work really well either. They were having some issues there in communicating. So Jennifer, being the brighter of the two in the relationship, had heard a radio program on Christian radio about this idea called the 5 love languages, and heard just a snippet of it. And so she decided to go and buy the book at the Christian bookstore and began to read it. And because she determined that she and Spencer were not communicating properly, and in reality what was happening is that it was as if they were speaking 2 different languages. And you know how difficult it is when you have people that cannot literally communicate. Of course, our missions team just got back, and it's really difficult to communicate with someone that literally speaks a different language. And that was ultimately what she had determined, that they were just speaking 2 different languages. They were communicating, they were talking, but they weren't getting anything accomplished, and that was a big challenge. And so it would be some of those examples I shared, like Spencer would try to buy her gifts and things, and it just wasn't what helped her understand love and intimacy. It didn't work. And Jennifer was trying to spend quality time with Spencer, and it wasn't being understood well. And hang on. Sorry, I got all choked up. This story about Spencer and Jennifer. These people. We've spent a lot of time counseling these people. And, they're finally starting to come around, but it's been a couple of decades. So, Jennifer, really, the way that she understood love best in those days was acts of service and quality time. She wanted to spend time together, and she wanted to see Spencer do things that showed that he loved her. Spencer, on the other hand, really liked stuff, really liked gifts, and also liked lots of back rubs. And so when they weren't communicating with each other that way, it caused some issues and some challenges in the relationship. Again, in essence, what was happening is they were speaking different languages. Because when we don't speak the same language, we are bound to just not understand each other, and we're going to miss opportunities to communicate well, and ultimately, a good relationship will not last if you can't talk, if there's no way to communicate, no way to understand each other. And so we were still counseling Spencer and Jennifer that they needed to work on communicating better, but often that's what people hear when they're having relational challenges. We just need to communicate. Guess what? Guys hear something different than what girls hear when someone says you need to communicate better. Would you agree with that statement? And communicating better, guys have a different perspective of what that usually means than girls. And so girls often, but not always, think communication is, so tell me about your day. Spare no detail. I want to hear it all. Every bit of it. Tell me about every interaction. I can't wait to hear it. Yes. I think that's what girls want to hear, kind of, at least, most of the time. Guys, this is the way that my brain thinks as a guy, is tell me all the details, but skip as much minutia as possible. Now, I would not say that to her now. Or that was another thing. Now, we counseled Jennifer and Spencer a lot on that one, too. Because Spencer is a fixer, like a lot of guys. And so when Jennifer would tell Spencer about the day, Spencer would go, okay, here's how you need to fix that. Anyone in the room identify with what I'm talking about? And Jennifer's response to Spencer was often, I don't need your input on how to fix it. I fixed it 8 hours ago. So I was just telling you about my day. And that was a relational challenge in that. Again, communication, we don't have good working definitions of that. And I think part of what we're trying to understand is really how to communicate more effectively. Because communication is not going to be understood the same way. Just hearing words and acting on those words, it's really not a good definition of communication. So ultimately, that's what we're trying to do. But I will tell you, it is my absolute firm belief, after being in ministry for many years now, counseling lots of couples through lots of challenges, couples that I never expected would make it, made it, and other couples that I always thought they would make it that didn't make it, and just various things in relational things. I do think if a man and a woman can begin to communicate really well, every relationship can be saved. But I will also tell you, I think a lot of interpersonal relationships can be saved with good communication in general. I think with children, I think that can happen. I think with employers, and relationships or coworker relationships, if you're communicating well and there's respect and understanding, it can save all kinds of things. Do you think I'm accurate when I say that? Do you think if we really understood each other better and we were willing to invest time in another person to make sure that they really understood where we were coming from, and it wasn't a debate all the time, it wasn't who can be right, it wasn't a pride issue, it was humility and a desire to understand why someone's thinking the way they think or doing what they're doing, do you think every relationship would be better in that case? Especially if both did it. Yes. And so again, this is why we say this is not just about marriages. This is about every relationship. And I will also tell you that these concepts, when I was a corporate guy, I used these concepts absolutely in my corporate setting, and it was amazing. Different people understand things in different ways, and I utilize these ideas there in every day often with different people. And so if we can begin to understand how to truly communicate, even within dialects, which we're going to talk about a little bit, every relationship is going to be better. Again, this is not just a marriage thing, it's a relational thing in general. So I want to take a step back, and before we get into the 5 love languages, but let me also tell you this. Many of you have been through the 5 love languages. I'm confident that some people did not come tonight because they've been through them before. Jennifer and I are going to give you a taste of the 5 love languages. It is not going to be a full seminar on it. It's not going to be a full detail. And we're also going to give you our spin on it, and we're going to explain to you how it has worked in our lives. Okay, that's the truth. The story about Spencer and Jennifer, it's us. So I'm going to talk about how we went from a terrible relationship to a wonderful, really life-giving relationship. That does not mean we have everything figured out. We still have issues and challenges at times in our communication. But we continue to work through that, and we're purposeful about it. And again, utilizing these in ministry, utilizing these with people you know, friends, children, other relationships are going to be helpful. But of course, you're going to need to take some of this with a grain of sand, because when we talk about physical touch, this may not be appropriate in the work setting. Yeah. You know, this may be highly frowned upon. And so that's okay. And we have a couple of attorneys in the room, and they could come and tell you this is highly frowned upon in the work setting, okay? So we're not going to do that. So out of curiosity then, what evidence do you think we have that, that love even exists? Can we ask that question? We talk about this idea of love all the time. Who in the world would think that love exists anyway? Why would we say that there is such a thing as love? Give me just a couple quick answers, and I'll repeat them for the purposes of our recording. What is, Okay, so God is love. So we begin to understand love from God's perspective first. And hopefully why we understand it that way is because of a place like Romans chapter 5, verse 8. So if you have a Bible or you're a note taker, then you can look at Romans 5:8. Now, Romans 5:8 is probably something that many of you know about and have maybe even memorized. Let me just tell you, if you don't have Romans 5:8 memorized, you should. It's a wonderful passage, because what we see in Romans 5:8 is this picture that God explains to us the way that love really looks. He demonstrates it for us, that he does not just tell us what love looks like, but shows it. Romans 5:8 says, and then I'm going to actually go back to verse 6. For while we were still weak, at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare to die. But God shows his love for us, and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So what we begin to see in Romans 5:8 is a demonstration of love. It is a picture that says love is sacrificial. And this is the way that we hopefully begin to see love in our lives and in our world. When you see people sacrificing something for somebody else, it's a picture, really, of love, because we need to understand what love is. You have heard me, if you're a Renew person, you've heard me say this over and over and over again, and I do it on purpose because I want there to never be a question. But love is not the ooey gooey squishy butterflies. We're going to talk about that more. Love is a choice. Love is doing the best for someone. When they don't deserve it, can't repay it. That's what love really is. Love is like mercy, is like grace, is like forgiveness. all of these things is a choice that you make on behalf of someone else to bless them, even if they can't repay it or give it back to you or deserve it. It's what love is. It's what mercy is. It's what grace is. It's what forgiveness is. All of these things tie together in that way. And so we begin to understand love this way. God demonstrates it for us. John chapter 15, then, is another way that we begin to understand how God loves us. So John chapter 15, let me read verses 12 through 14 and then verse 17. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. So what does that say? There is no way to show love better than to die for somebody. Would you agree with that? Is that the ultimate act of love? Is that you would be willing to step in front of a speeding bus to push someone else out of the way? For those of you in the room that have children, you probably can understand it that way. I will tell you, for me personally, when I had children, I understood God's love so much better. It really helped me to understand it. I understood substitutionary death, which is someone dies in your place. Of course, every one of us that are adults, we've done something bad and someone else took the blame, probably. Maybe it was in grade school that happened. You know, who broke all the chalk? And Johnny takes the blame, even though he knows it was me, that kind of thing. That's a substitutionary thing. Or someone else did something bad and you took the blame. Because why would you do it? It's love. You love that person. You want the best for that person. So it was always something understood from a substitutionary perspective. But I will tell you, I probably did not really fully understand sacrificial love till I had children. And then it was this idea, the moment I even thought of these children, it was like, I would totally do anything for this kid and would die in a heart's beat notice to save them if they were going to die or if they were hurting really bad. I would do anything it would take. And that was what really began to help shape that concept for me. And, of course, God says it right there. Greater love has no one than this, that somebody lays down his life for his friends. You are my friends, Jesus says. Now, that should blow you away. That should stop you in your tracks when Jesus says, you're my friends if you do what I command. Now, that means there's a relational thing on us that we have to say, I'm willing to make Jesus Lord of my life. Does this make sense to everyone? If we are willing to say, I'm going to let God have his way in my life, I surrender, I'm going to do what he tells me to do, then Jesus says, you're my friends. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant doesn't know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These things I command you, so that you will love one another. Jesus gives us an example of how we're to love each other. And so he sets these examples for us. He reveals this to us, but also shows us very clearly that God doesn't just tell us, I love you, but he demonstrates it. And he tells us that we need to work at that as well. And so what does the Bible say about love? Well, let's go to the love chapter. What's the love chapter in the Bible? Huh? 1 Corinthians 13. Out of curiosity, for those of you that are married in the room, how many of you had this read at your wedding? Just curious. Okay, I was going to say none. Okay, 4 or so. That's interesting. It's usually there. It's usually a part of this that we begin to see this 1 Corinthians 13 idea. And so, what do we see in here? Verse 4. We get an explanation of what love looks like. It's patient and kind. Now, let me stop here and say this. Homework for all of you in the room is to read this in first person and then ask yourself, is this true? Spencer is patient and Spencer is kind. Is it true? I have to deal with those things. Am I patient and am I kind? Maybe sometimes, maybe not others. Those are the things that we have to ask. But love is patient and kind, does not envy or boast, is not arrogant or rude, does not insist on its own way. Why does that make sense? Well, of course, love is sacrificial. We're going to give someone the very best when they don't deserve it. It's not irritable or resentful. Spencer is not irritable. Spencer is not resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. We all need to be challenged to be able to read that with our name inserted in those passages. Now, let me just stop here and say, most of us would have a difficulty in catching all of those perfectly all the time. Jesus ultimately is the great example of what love really looks like. However, that can't be our excuse to go, well, only Jesus can be patient and kind and not irritable all the time. But is it still something that we should strive for? Is it the way that we should treat other people? Oh, and by the way, who are we supposed to love? Everybody. Which is a challenge, because there are some people that are a lot easier to love than others. Can I get an amen from the congregation? Can I get an amen? Some people are easy to love. Some people are not easy to love. Thank you. Preach it, brother. So we all know that this is true. And so, but it's God that can do this work in us. And so the side message of all this is something, if you are irritable all the time, it should be something you pray through all the time. When you get up in the morning, you should say, God, help me to not be irritable today. Help me to love the way that I need to love. Do you agree? Help me to not be impatient today. Oh, and everybody always says, never pray for patience. Well, here's the deal. I've said it before in my life too, but here's the truth. If you need to learn patience, you need God to teach you how to be patient. Quit trying to be God and tell him, I'm not going to ask you for the very best. The truth is, if I'm truly surrendered to God, I should ask you, God, you do anything you need to do in me to make me into the person you want me to be. I'm not going to have any exclusions. Safe surrender is not surrender. God, I'll do anything you want as long as you don't, or as long as I can have. That's not surrender. That's hard. I know it is. But these are those things that we begin to understand. So 1 John chapter 4. Let me read these to you really quick. Verses 7 through 21. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. In this the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him. And this is love. Not that we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God abides in us, and his love is perfected in us. People are going to see God's love in us. By this we know that we abide in him, and he in us, because he has given us his Spirit. That means that we're the temple of the Holy Spirit. If you're a Christian, God has put a part of himself in you, which gives you the ability to become a truly loving person. But you have to be surrendered to it. You have to say, I want to be this person. I think early in my life, I took pride in being the hard man. I took pride in that. I took pride in being the one who was willing to fight and say angry things. I think I took pride in that. I loved to stuff people in a box with my words or my fists if I needed to. I took pride in it. And I think a lot of people do. But in order to be the kind of guy that God calls us to be, we have to be surrendered to that and through that kind of thing. And so whoever confesses that Jesus, verse 15. Okay, I skipped a verse here. Verse 13. By this we know that we abide in him and he in us, because he has given us his Spirit. And we have seen and testified that the Father has sent his Son to be the Savior of the world. Whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son of God, God abides in him and he in God. So we have come to know and to believe the love that God has for us. God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. By this is love perfected with us, so that we may have confidence for the day of judgment. Because as he is, so also are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. We love because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. This commandment we have from him: whoever loves God must also love your husband, your wife, your friends, your coworkers, your children, and that jerk that always steals your parking spot. Are we all together? So this is where we begin to understand it. So what we want to do then is give you a taste of the 5 love languages. Again, we don't have time to get through the whole thing, and we may not even have time to get through all of it tonight. and that's okay. We're going to try and work through it pretty quickly for you, and then we may come back to it some next week. But we're going to give you a taste of this, and our goal is to just continue to understand these in the context of biblical principles. So it is a book that's written by Gary Chapman. I would encourage you to go get it. If this rings your bell and you really like it, go get it. Go read it. We're just giving you a flavor of it, and we have a link on there, and you can go look it up on the little notes page, and guys, you'll get yours in a little while. But here's the thing. We do this because although God teaches us everything we need to know, God also does use people to help create things and write things and communicate things that will help us to understand things better. And so this is one reason people like me get up and preach. It's because God helps us to be able to use his word to communicate it in the context of our lives. And so this is like that. It's like the Five Love Languages book is a message, but always you need to check it with Scripture and make sure that it fits. Just like every sermon you ever listen to, you should always check it with Scripture. Make sure that it's biblically accurate. You're responsible for those things just as I am. And so always check those things. But we want to basically have these two goals: whet your appetite to learn more, and the second is to at least try to begin speaking to spouses and others in a way that they will understand better. Because when we do this and we communicate more effectively, we will be a better witness for Christ. We will be able to hopefully love better and accomplish the things that God has actually called us to. So we're going to do it in the context of Gary Chapman's book on the 5 love languages. So we're going to start with this. So that's what the book actually looks like, or at least the cover used to look like. And so here, as I said in the beginning, I think this is a topic of stewardship. I think we need to be good stewards of this kind of information. So hopefully you'll have someone as you go through this you can think about that this will apply to. Okay, next slide. So what are the 5 love languages? Now, the ladies have already taken an assessment in here. Guys, you're going to do yours when we're all done. Let me say this. Sometimes taking an assessment on the five love languages reveals some pain, because when you go through it, what you will find is that it gives you an idea of how you like to understand love. And so the idea is there are 5 primary ways to understand love: words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, and physical touch. Now, I could define all these. Basically, words of affirmation is you've done a good job, you look nice, things like that. And there's different dialects of that, and we'll talk about these individually. Quality time is you spend time with that person. Receiving gifts is obvious. You receive a gift, someone gives you something. An act of service is you're doing something for somebody else. And then physical touch is even something as simple as a back rub or something like that, although there are dialects to that as well. And we'll breach that topic, but very gently as we talk through that. But these are, what happens is when you begin to understand that each person in here needs all 5 of these. Everyone in here has all 5 of these, and you need all 5 of this. However, sometimes a 1 or 2 of them will be more primary than the others. And so you will find that some of them are really ways that you experience love and understand love better than others. An example would be words of affirmation from Jennifer. I don't need a lot of words of affirmation to feel loved. Does that make sense? And so if you look at this and think about it in the size of tanks, like if you were to look at each of these 5 things as a big tank, well, my tank for words of affirmation is that big. I don't need a lot to feel loved by her. But physical touch, my love tank for physical touch is as high as the ceiling, and it's got a rusty bottom and a pretty good leak. That means it's got to be poured into all the time, because it just drains right out, and I get empty, and I go, why don't you love me anymore? I got shoulders that need to be rubbed, woman. No, that is not a way to ask and communicate well. I showed you how not to do it. Those hands don't look like they're busy. So that is how not to do it. And so, but does everyone understand? So words of affirmation for me is very small. I don't need a whole lot of affirmation, but physical touch is really big. And so all of us need all 5 of these, but in different levels. Now let me also say, these are going to be different tanks for different people too. I don't need physical touch from a lot of people. My love tank for physical touch is very small with other people other than Jennifer. Everybody makes sense on that one? And so this is why you have to use some sense in that. that you're not going to come up and rub on everybody because they said to you in a group, I'm a physical touch person. Oh, really? Yeah? You like this? That's good, huh? So you got to be careful there, okay? So that's what we're talking about. And so each of these are going to have dialects. Each of these are going to have their own understanding of size, of what is needed in order to fill those things, all right? So let's talk about the first one a little bit with the words of affirmation. Jennifer, if you could do that, and then we'll continue to lead you through the rest of these.
Okay. With words of affirmation, and as Spencer already mentioned, there's different dialects that kind of go with this. Just like one part of the country may call the thing you check out with a shopping cart. What do they call it down here? A buggy. So it's kind of the
That's
same
weird.
thing. Yeah, that was getting used to. It's kind of the same thing here in that just because you may like words of affirmation, you may like it in a certain way done. It's just a general category that it could fall into. So let's kind of look at those bullet points on there of all the different kinds. So the first one is verbal compliments, okay? So verbal compliments are directly to that person. So you look great. It's directly to them. You're looking them in the eye and you're, giving them some sort of compliment or some sort of feedback about that. The second one.
Can I just say, and it's also about you've done a good job. Not always just about what you look like. Yeah.
It's a verbal compliment. The second one is words of appreciation, which means it's not really a compliment per se in the sense of what you and I may think of a compliment, but it's saying, I appreciated you. You did something. That is words of appreciation. Hey, thank you for helping get the kids bathed tonight. Thank you for what you did. Thank you for working so hard today. Those are words of appreciation. Something was done and you're thankful for it. And so you're giving them those words of affirmation for that act that they did. Next. Encouraging or inspiring words. This is another dialect of the words of affirmation. An example of this is you have a fascinating way of telling a story. You should publish some of these. Helping to pour into somebody for maybe some hopes or dreams that they have, and you're wanting to inspire them and help to drive them towards their goals or their dreams. That's a very different dialect of words of affirmation. And some of it are things that we would love to hear from somebody. Somebody just encourage me to do, even in my Christian walk. Someone just give me that encouragement that I need, that I'm on the right track or I'm doing something right. The next one is showing empathy. Showing empathy is another dialect. So it's when you are able to kind of put yourself into that person's shoes and you're able to go to them and say, oh, man, I am just so sorry that happened. And you're not trying to solve that problem. You're just trying to say, wow, that must have been really hard for you to go through. And just showing those words of empathy that you understand what they have been through. Kind words. And I have in here tone of voice. Tone of voice is huge. For anyone else? If you are a words of affirmation person, tone, you pick up on it very easy. And I would say kind of going along with this is facial expressions. If you've ever been through any communication class, how you show your body language and your facial expression is part of communication. And so how you present that is also another dialect. And if this is one of the key tanks that you have that needs to be filled, that's a primary for you, it is really important that whenever someone is doing this act for you, that they have the right tone of voice. They don't say it sharply. They don't say things to you in a degrading manner, condescending manner. You would pick up on that, or with a certain look in their face. And if you have teenagers, you may have seen this look a lot. I've seen it a lot. And so, yeah. Oh, yeah. So if someone that you love has those words of affirmation that need, then when you speak to them, you need to be very tuned in to this concept of how's my face look? What's my body language look like as I'm going through this? So say things with sweetness.
If I can also add, one of the areas that we are really challenged in our society is we do a lot of our communicating through text, and it is impossible to communicate well that last idea. And we have a lot of communication errors and issues because it's hard to read emotion and into texting. When I counsel people, I tell them often, I have actually said this to couples before, it is illegal to text one another. You can't do it ever again. Don't ever text the other person because it's always communication issues. And if you need to talk to them, you call them on the phone. And if Even if you're running late, you don't text them. I have had people that have had such dramatic relational challenges because of tone, because you read a tone in with your head of what you expect them to be saying or whatever words are said, and it's a challenge. Even with simple things like K. You say this big thing. Anyone had that experience? You say this big thing, and you're explaining this great stuff, and the response is, K. It's like, K? K? Really? That's how you respond? I took like 20 minutes to text that because I had to correct all the auto text problems from Siri and not say inappropriate things to you. And my response is, K. I'd rather you just ignore me. Just don't say anything at all. And so we have to be really careful of those things.
The other thing kind of relating to some of those the kind words is also when it relates to how you present your voice and things like that. One thing I know early in our marriage I had to learn is he'd be like, are you angry about something? I'd be like, no, because I was not in charge of my face. And I would just be going around doing things. He's like, you look mad. Are you upset? I'm like, I don't realize that I'm not smiling. You know what I mean? When I'm just, my plain face apparently doesn't look happy. Whenever I'm just thinking of something, but I have to try to mentally think, oh, what's my face look like when I'm in this interaction or just working around the house? Or, when I get in a hurry, my words become very short. It's not that I'm irritated. I'm a very task-focused person. And so I just got to get to the next thing. And so I've had to kind of learn that can come across in an irritating way or act like I'm angry, and I'm not. So, again, it's communication. Humble words is making a request, not a demand. There is a way that you can ask for things in a loving way and not make it a demand. And so just, again, another dialect of that words of affirmation. Next. Indirect words of affirmation. For some people, this is what does it. You're complimenting them to somebody else, and guess what? It gets back. It gets back, and they're so built up because the fact that you complimented them, in an indirect way. So, for example, your son is a great provider for our family. Wow. For him to hear about that from his mom, that, his wife thinks that speak volumes. So, another dialect. Next. And then affirming in front of others. So, you're having a cookout or something like that, for example, and in front of the group, you're like, hey, he does this amazing thing. And, you should eat his steak. Or, wow, at work, you wouldn't believe the projects that he's working on. Or think about what she's doing, things like that, and affirming that person in front of others. And again, these are different dialects, but they're also things that you can use with different relationships. Like these are things that I love much more from my mom. Words of affirmation from my mom, don't need as much from him in this world. But again, different relationships will have different types of ways you like to hear that, those words of affirmation.
Okay, our next love language is quality time. So, again, these are all tanks. Everybody has all 5. Some of you may be very high on the words of affirmation. You need a lot of those to feel loved by somebody. Others would need not very much. Quality time, same thing. Some people need a lot of time with other people that they really love to feel loved. They need someone that says, I'm going to give you that quality time. But, of course, we all need at least some of that. And so quality time is the first bullet here is a central aspect of quality time is togetherness, not just proximity. Here's what I mean by that. Quality time, for people that really want quality time, they want to spend time together, just being in the same room doesn't count. And so that means if you're each sitting on your own couch and looking at your phones, that is not quality time. Everybody with me? Just because you're in the same room, even just because you're in the same car, that is not quality time. For someone that really wants quality time, that's not quality time. Quality time is interaction. It is togetherness. So what that involves, the next point would be it involves quality conversation. That means it's a two-way street. Quality time is going to involve communicating. Now, often men and women do this poorly, that this is a challenge. Most guys do not want to talk about their day, and most ladies want to. That is not a rule across the board, but it is what I have found through counseling hundreds and hundreds of people over the years and being a man and married to a woman. And so that is sometimes a challenge. But being quality time is going to be two-way communication. Understanding the people that you're communicating with, though, is important. But let me also say, beyond just relationships in a marriage, if you have coworker issues, if you only communicate with someone in one way, that you come in and you say, this is what you do, and I don't care at all what you have to say about it, it's going to be an issue. Everybody with me on that? Taking time to listen as well as speak is super important. Of course, the old joke adage is, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You need to listen twice as much as you speak. And so we do need to understand that communication and quality time is going to be a two-way thing, and that means we need to learn how to talk with each other, being open with each other, and talking about what you want to talk about. Now, it takes practice for a lot of people that are challenged with this. It takes practice. Would you agree with that? It takes practice to spend time together and talking with one another about what's going on. For a lot of people that don't like to just sit and talk that way, because again, I think a lot of people that don't like that kind of communication, they will see it as sitting on the couch and staring into one another's eyes and tell me about your day. Don't spare any details. And a lot of people just can't stand it. I will tell you, when I was a corporate guy, many, many years ago now, I'd come home. Jennifer had been at home with the kids all day. She wanted adult conversation, and she wanted me to tell her everything about my day, and it annoyed me to death. I did not want to tell her about all the people I'd fired that day. Did not want to tell her about all the contracts I had to work on or deal with. I didn't want to deal with it. I dealt with it, and it was done. I didn't want to have to come home and relive it. And so we had to learn how to communicate through that, where I wasn't expected to tell her every bit of the minutia, but I could still talk about my day in a general way, in a way that I felt comfortable, and she had to be able to accept that, and over time it got easier to talk about that stuff. Everybody with me on that? Not forcing me to talk through it, but over time it became something that I enjoyed doing when we learned how to talk to each other the right way. Participating in quality activities is a way to have quality time. This isn't just about talking with each other. Spending time doing stuff together is an important part of that. Now, I want to say this: join one another in each other's world. I know of people, even here at Renew, that, for instance, I'll give an example. The ladies hate going deer hunting, but they will go and sit in a deer blind with the husband because they want to enter into his world. Make sense? And they'll do that because they want the quality time and to join him in that world. But it's a two-way street, guys. And so it means you figuring out what is it your wife wants to do and joining her in that world. But again, it's not just a marriage relationship. Join people in their world. Invest yourself in them. It will build relationships, no matter what it is. And so that's an important thing. And last thing I want to say about quality time is no multitasking. So for those of you that say, I'm a great multitasker, please quit lying to the world. I am a great multitasker. I am. However, even though I can hear a conversation and be typing something totally different, and then it get to the end and she could say to me, are you listening to me? And I could go, actually, yes. I could recount every word that she said for 5 minutes. I could repeat it back to her verbatim. The reality, though, is you're still not listening as well as you could if you're fully tuned in. And so, and this isn't anything. One of the things I had to learn as a corporate guy because of this was that when I had people come into my office, even though I could listen to them and they could tell me about what was going on and continue to work on what I was doing, it showed them I don't really care what you have to say, even though I could totally hear it and I could process it. The first thing I used to do when people would walk into my office is shut the lid of my computer and go, I'm all yours. What do you need? Make sense? This is how you invest in people. Quit multitasking. Quit doing it. It is not good. Even if you can do it, it demonstrates that you're not fully engaged. Okay? So this is how we spend time with each other.
Okay, we're going to go on to the next one. Receiving gifts. This is probably the one that, you can go ahead and put the bullets up. This is probably one of the ones that a lot of people think of when they think of showing someone love, is I'm going to buy you something. I'm going to buy you something. But as he mentioned earlier, for me, it didn't do anything. That was a nice ring. Thanks. You know, I'm not a stuff person. Once he figured that out, what really happened was, like at the high school where I graduated, he created a scholarship, a nursing scholarship. in my name because that was more meaningful to me, because it was doing something for me that would bless somebody else. So there are ways to give gifts that are different and more meaningful than stuff. So that was one thing that he did that I really liked.
I forgot about that. That was really awesome.
It was really good. It was good.
I wish I remember who told me about how to do that. No.
Maybe I directed you. I don't know. No. All right. So to be an effective giver, so if the person you love, or again, all of us have these tanks. If that's the thing that makes them feel loved is getting something, then you might need to change your attitude about money. We have talked with different couples, and even in our own relationship, Spencer, in the very beginning, he's not as much this way now, but he likes stuff, and I don't mean just piddly stuff. I mean expensive stuff. Now, he liked cufflinks and custom clothes and alligator shoes in his corporate world, and he likes.
I know it surprises you, but it is a true story.
Yeah, $1,000 suits. He liked that. And so that was his past world where that's what made him feel loved. So it would be something that we would need to think about, plan for, because God doesn't want you to be a poor steward of your funds either. But I'm just saying, to show love to that person who likes stuff, you do have to maybe change. You're like, okay, I'm investing in my relationship. That's kind of how you need to think about that. And you need to plan ahead for those types of things. Like what it says, you need to be a good steward of what God's given you, but it does mean you might need to plan ahead or save up or figure out payment plans or whatever for that stuff. Gifts don't always have to be something you buy, as we all know. They can also be found. You can find something. It could be flowers, just go out, cut down some pretty flowers, in someone's yard. No, I'm kidding. They can be purchased, or you can make it. Spencer, for one, he does not like me to buy him a Hallmark card. He would rather me make a card. As much of a gift person as he had been, even in the old days, he does not want one of those bought. He would rather me sit down, figure out some poetry, draw a little picture. That's what he would want. He wants me to make him something. And so that's, again, like a different dialect for that particular gift tank that he would like. The other thing, and this is something as a woman for a man who likes gifts, is allowing him to purchase something. It's like giving permission. So yes, you need a new drill. I'm not going to go pick that out for you. That's probably not the area that I have an expertise in. I don't think he would want me. Or I won't pick out a car for you.
Right.
Yeah. You could pick out a car for me. I will not pick out a car for you. And so allowing them to do that, it's like blessing them with that ability to go get something from themselves. Again, another dialect of that particular one. And the last one is giving the gift of self. It's your presence. It's a little different than quality time. And it's usually, we think of this in the time of crisis. Someone's really going through that hard time, and you're just there. You're giving up your time. It's the gift of yourself there. Other types of gifts that you may think of that may fall into this category, for example, are, yes, I have long hair. I could go a little shorter, but he likes long hair. So it is a gift for him because that's what he likes. And so even sometimes the way that you can present yourself can be a gift for somebody else. In some relationships, that's maybe what you have found, So he doesn't force me to or anything like that, but I do it because I know he likes it. So that's a gift for him. And all of the time it takes me to curl it is an act of service.
80s hair.
No. So again, so that can kind of fall into that. So gifts can be in those different categories.
Yeah, and I think I want to stop here. We've got 2 more to do, but I want to stop and tell you that, and we'll probably talk about this more at the end, but I think it's important here to say that your love languages will change over time. And they're going to be different with different people. So, for instance, in the earlier days of our marriage, my gift tank was as high as my physical touch tank. But as I think the connection is, as I became more spiritually mature, I became less materialistic, and my desire to have more and more stuff just went down and down and down. And what happened was my quality time tank went up and up and up. Early in our marriage, my quality time tank was as small as my words of affirmation tank. I didn't need to sit on the couch and talk about my day in order to feel loved. I just didn't need it. I didn't need to be told, I like your hair or whatever in order to feel loved. But over time, what happened was I began to appreciate my time with Jennifer more and more and more, and that quality time tank increased and increased and increased. And now, and you have to be creative sometimes. For instance, we have busy lives, just like everybody in here. And so one of the things, in order to make sure we have time together, is I may say, it's Thursday, I need to run some errands. I've got to go out to Little Rock and West Little Rock and do this. Do you want to come with me? And we'll get in the car together, radio's off, and we just talk, and we just catch up and dream and talk about you and how much we love you and pray for you and all kinds of things. And we really do those things together. And it's great. It's great quality time. But because you're busy, you've got to be purposeful to pour into each other's love tank that way. Does that make sense? We go 2 or 3 weeks and we haven't spent any time just catching up and talking about it. It creates tension and we fight. And so what we find out is, oh, you know what? We just haven't spent any time together. And that's what gets you out of that rhythm. And so it's that kind of thing. But again, these are going to shift and change over time. So again, back to when I was a corporate guy, there were certain people on my team that really loved words of affirmation. You could tell. I could walk into their office and go, you know what? When you did this, you hit it out of the park. I've never seen anyone do it better. You're amazing. I just want to let you know. Or better yet, send an email to the entire company and go, I just want you to stop by Bill's office and tell him how amazing he is because he did this today. That kind of thing. Words of affirmation. There are some people who would be like, that's not necessary. I'm good. But if I bought them a little thing, that a pen or just something, it didn't have to be expensive or whatever. Some people were like, wow, you thought of me? Like when you went on vacation, you thought of me and you bought this for me? Yeah, absolutely. And so you'll find different people in your life also, not just the people you're married to, but just different people in your life. Some of them really need words of affirmation from you in order to feel loved, and you need it from them. And that's where sometimes we get in trouble, is if we don't receive that love, we feel empty, and we feel unloved if we're not receiving those that way. And so we need to be aware of it, which is part of why we're talking about this, okay? We need to be aware of it. The other thing I'll say really quick is that you often will give love the way that you like to receive it. So in the early days of marriage, because I liked physical touch, I was quick to want to give her a back rub because my brain said the way you understand love is you want to touch that person. Does that make sense? She didn't need a whole lot of back rubs. Spencer does. That's not her love tank. But the other thing was gifts. Because I really enjoyed the gifts, when I thought of with affinity in my heart for Jennifer, I wanted to buy her something. But she didn't care. It wasn't her thing. Jennifer would rather me do the dishes for her than to buy her a ruby ring set in diamonds. It's just the truth. Now, for those of you that are married to a woman who doesn't like gifts, hallelujah. It's wonderful. In fact, Jennifer gets mad at me if I spend money on her on stuff. She does. She gets angry. Christmas time sucks because it's so hard to find a way to give gifts to someone who doesn't want gifts. So even our children have learned how to give mama gifts is coupons. Coupons. Giving her coupons for I'll do this and I'll do that and I'll do that. And mama checks them in and goes, hey, Hannah, guess what? I want to cash in the hour of laundry folding or whatever it is, And that's how, because it's an act of service. Everybody understand? She would rather have an act of service, not a gift. So what do? You change the gift in order to fit the gift need and the act of service. All right, so let's talk about acts of service for just a minute. So acts of service then, the doer must be done, for the doer, it has to be done with positive spirit. So Jennifer really, really loves it when I go and do the dishes or change a light bulb that needed to be changed without being asked 74 times. That kind of thing. I see it's burned out, I'm going to go do it. Couple things. Number one, I can't moan about it. I did the dishes. I hope you're happy and you feel loved. It doesn't go well. It just doesn't go well. It doesn't make it a gift. It removes it from being an act of service. Everybody with me? So if you complain and moan about serving someone, it doesn't work. It removes the joy of it. And so you need to do it with a positive spirit. And this is important. You also don't need to do it and look for a pat on the back, because the truth is, here's what I've learned after 23 years of marriage. People are acts of service oriented. They notice. They notice when things get done. I've also found that they don't always say something all the time because they want to see if there's some consistency in it. But if every time I change a light bulb that needs to be changed, I don't run to Jennifer and go, hey, I changed all the light bulbs. Are you proud of me? Yeah, that's good. And so, but if my words of affirmation tank's low, I would need that. And that might be an indicator for you. If someone's always looking to be told you've done a good job, it's probably because their words of affirmation tank is really big. Everybody with me on that? So you can be thinking about all the relationships where people do something and then they want to tell you, hey, did I do a good job? How was that? It's because they need to be told you've done a great job or whatever. So acts of service, you got to do it with a positive attitude. The requester, because it is okay to request, it needs to be a request, not a demand. So if Jennifer were to say to me, hey, you better do the dishes today, this would be a problem. Because it would be hard for me to want to do that with joy in my heart. And so, but for her to say, hey, if you don't mind, if you've got time, if you could do the dishes, that'd be awesome. The answer would be absolutely. I should have thought of that on my own, but I didn't. But I will take care of that with a positive spirit, okay? What we do for each other before marriage is no indication of what we will do after marriage. So on a relationship side, now we could talk all hour about this, that the things that you would do in order to understand love from one another is not always the same after you've been married 2, 3, 4, 25 years. Things change. And you need to be able to adapt to that and understand that. Just because someone was good at something in the beginning doesn't always mean that they will be. Part of that is because of infatuation. And that is that infatuation, what most people think is love. We're going to talk about this more next week. What most people think is love is not love, it's infatuation. The ooey gooey squishy butterflies is not love. Love is a maturity of, I'm going to choose to do the best for you. Infatuation, that when you walk in the room and I feel all squishy and wiggly inside, at most that usually lasts about 18 months. And so the problem is if you know somebody and you don't know them very long and you're all squishy and warm and all gooey, and then you get married and then the infatuation runs out and now you're responsible for choosing love, it doesn't work well if you're living off of infatuation. Everybody with me? And so we need to understand that. And that's, I think, the same thing in everything. You get into a work-type situation and even in a work relationship. It's great for a while no matter what, and then some of the things that torque you off get worse and worse over time. So we have to give acts of service that are purposeful. We need to be able to be purposeful in serving people. Let me just say this lastly. If you have people in your life that need acts of service in their life, you need to put it in your calendar to go out of your way to serve them. If you never think about it, guys, gals, whoever it is, if you are married to someone or you have relationship with someone's acts of service person, you might need to literally write it down and remind yourself on Tuesday at 3 o'clock, how am I going to serve Jennifer today? But, of course, that may be words of affirmation or any of these. If you're just not good at this, write it down and remind yourself.
Okay, the last one we're going to talk about, and you can go ahead and put the bullet points up, Carmen, is physical touch. Again, like we've been talking, everything has dialects. So you could be a physical touch person who likes implicit physical touch. So in other words, I'm a huggy person. I'm a huggy kissy person or a handshaker. Attaboy, boys need sometimes pats, between each other. And I see in games you whack each other on the butt too, which is really weird. But so anyway, you can do it. That's fine. But you could be one of those people where, what we have found is even in our son, he likes to wrestle. I mean, he loves that wrestle. And that, I think for him, for teenagers, is some of that physical touch for boys. They just wrestle and play fight, and that kind of stuff like that. So that's one type of dialect. The second type of dialect is for physical touch is explicit, which means it demands a more focused attention. So that would be a massage, or intercourse falls within that category. Now, I need to say here that you see the last bullet point there. Sex for some people, and that I will say mainly men, because psychology shows it, counseling over years shows it. Sex for men is not always for love. There is a physical drive there. We know biologically there is more drive for sex with testosterone. That's just what it is. Than there is usually in women. Doesn't mean that women don't have that drive, but it does mean there is a biological, physical reason for that. So it doesn't necessarily mean that is always fulfilling his emotional need, because he may not be wired that way, but there's a physical need there. Does that make sense? There is a difference. There is a difference. I have known men that were not physical touch men. I would say a lot of people that we have done this seminar with and counseled, there is a men that this is a primary love language for a lot of men, but there's some it's just not. But the main thing here with this is, with physical touch, is don't try to touch that person in your own way, in your own time. That doesn't make it an act of love. Again, just like with any of these love languages, it's how they need that received. And something that for Spencer, he would say things like, if you would just, when you walk by me and I'm sitting on the couch, just even this, that, just to know when I am even in the room with him, just touch. That is how much he just loves that. Now, I grew up in a huggy, kissy family, wasn't deprived of, physical attention there, but that's not me. I don't even think about it. If he doesn't hold my hand, I don't think about it. So, but for him, that's something that you have to get used to in that relationship, is that, oh, I need to physically, mentally think, oh, I need to go rub his neck today, or I need to come over and hold his hand. Just like with any love language, you have to be purposeful, okay? There is a purposefulness in that. Now, when we talk about intercourse, of course, we're discussing this in the context of marriage. This is the only place that God authorizes this, is in the context of marriage. And in our women's class last week, we talked about 1 Corinthians 7, 1 through 6, which talks about not withholding your sexual relationship from your spouse. It is sinful. Not withholding your sexual relationship from your spouse unless there is an agreed upon time, and then to come back together. Why does it say that? Because if you are withholding that, you are allowing temptation to come in. You're allowing Satan to try to come in there. God knows when he knits you together as one flesh, that intimacy is the deepest part of connectedness that you can have as a couple. It is. And so to deprive each other of that means you're not having that connectedness. Okay? So it is, and I know for a lot of women, this is an area of struggle that we have learned about throughout the years from doing counseling. So one thing I would think it's important just to try to say here on this one is, just as valid as it is for you to have acts of service done and get your car washed and have your husband bathe in your kids, or doing things around the house, just as valid as that is for you, sex may be valid for him. And you can't negate that. You can't go, well, it's not important, I don't want to do that. No, that's not what we're saying. As valid as your needs are, to have that love shown to you, it's just as valid for him. It's just as valid for him. And it doesn't mean that you have to be in the mood for all the time. Now, we hope that through connectiveness in your marriage, that you will have that desire for your husband. And if you don't have that for your spouse, you need to pray for that. You need to pray for that. But we are commanded to not withhold that. So I need to say that because we have just come across so many people that, that it's an indicator of your relationship if you do not have that intimacy part in your marriage. It is an indicator. So you're not to withhold that. And that is one thing important about physical touch is that, again, there's different dialects, and you need to figure out for the people in your life which one is most important that they need.
Yeah. All right, so we're basically out of time. Let me just finish up with a couple thoughts. First of all, we're going to continue this next week. We gave you a taste of the 5. One of the things that we would love for you to do is submit some questions to us that you want us to address, and we can talk about whatever. This last topic is an important topic that no one ever talks about. You've got good news in talking about that topic. If you want to talk through that, you have Dr. Jennifer, and you have a biologist turned pastor guy. We can talk about it in any way you want to, and we have had very detailed conversations about these things because they're just areas no one's ever talked about. And so if you have questions about that or whatever, part of next week will be some Q&A time. And if you want to submit them ahead of time, that's great. If you want to wait and get here, we'll have some slips of paper, and you can write them out and do that as well. So let me just finish with this. All of these are a choice. It takes, first of all, understanding how you're wired and how your tanks function. So for me, I'm physical touch and quality time. Those are my highest tanks. My gifts tank, though, is still probably about mid-level, but my words of affirmation tank is really low. And, you have different needs in different areas. Jennifer is quality time and acts of service. Those are her big tanks. And you get down, gifts is very small, probably the smallest one. And words of affirmation, and so you have different needs in different areas, but different people are going to also have different needs. So understanding what yours are and then understanding what someone else's is important. And then ultimately, you have to decide, am I going to love this person or not? And you all know saying I love you is not always the best indicator of actual loving. It is, yes, words are cheap. Show me. This is how to show me, not just telling. Now, words are important. Everybody needs some of that. But we also are going to need these other things and be purposeful and taking action. And again, if you're just not good at it, figure it out and then write it down. Remind yourself on doing these kinds of things because love is a choice. So we'll talk more about this next week. We're going to talk about understanding one another better. We'll also talk about some very specific ways that you can begin to develop these things in a creative way. We'll have you working at tables in creative ways of how to give acts of service and things like that. So you want to make sure that you're back next week. So here's what we're going to do. Ladies, we're done for tonight. What I'm going to ask you to do is head out into the lobby or down the hall. And then, hang on, I'm going to pray, so give me just a second. And then, guys, I'm going to keep you in here, and we're going to do our little love languages survey, and we're going to talk about a few things here as our group time. Thank you for coming tonight. Sorry we're a couple minutes over. We'll do better next week. We'll work at that. But hopefully this has been helpful to you, and you have some direction on things to think about and work through. If you have questions, just let us know. Let me pray, and then we'll send the ladies out. Father, thank you for tonight. We thank you for your word, and we thank you especially for teaching us what love looks like and what it means. Thank you for demonstrating it. Now help us to have a desire to show love to people, not just our spouses, but our kids, our friends, our coworkers, to really be a people that are known for our love. Of course, that's your promise, that if we can love one another like you've loved us, people will know, and it will change them. So help us to grow in this area, in all these areas. We praise you for what you've done here tonight in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, ladies, thank you. Love you much. We'll see you in a little bit. Guys, if you can conglomerate in the tables up closer, that would help me out.